Greetings and welcome to today's webinar entitled Driving Enterprise Value with Application Portfolio Management Maturity. At this time, all participants are in a listen-only mode. A brief question and answer session will follow the formal presentation. Please submit your questions using the WebEx chat feature. Names and companies will remain anonymous. If anyone should require operator or technical assistance during the conference, please press *0 on your telephone keypad. As a reminder, this conference is being recorded. It is now my pleasure to introduce your moderator, Mr. Uli Kalix, Vice President, Product Line Management for Alphabet. Thank you, Mr. Kalix. You may begin.
Thanks, Everett. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone on the call here today. It's obviously a very timely subject, application portfolio management, and how one can mature the subject in corporate organizations. It is timely specifically in lieu of the upcoming discussions around plans for 2011 and budgets associated with 2011, and we'll certainly be touching on this subject. I am very pleased to welcome with me here today, and who's actually taking a big portion of the conversation today, Gene Lagenza. He is a research VP and principal analyst with Forrester Research. Gene has many years of experience in the subject of application portfolio management, and hence we are particularly pleased with him joining us on this call today. So Gene is going to take the first part of the conversation, introducing the subject, and then I'll be picking up later on to discuss some of the more process-related and introductory topics as to how can one bring this into organizations. With this, I'm handing over to Gene, and looking forward to your part of the presentation.
Thank you, Uli, and welcome everyone to the webinar. I'm very pleased to be here with the Alphabet folks. As Uli said, this is a very timely presentation. It's a very timely subject, as it turns out. I've got plenty of opinion to send your way, but also probably more importantly, some data to talk about the current state of application portfolio management in terms of where it is and has been up to now and where it looks like it's going in the future. What are we talking about? The role of application portfolio management is really about having a methodology about your approach to managing the application landscape. And that methodology there is a critical word. There are a lot of ways to manage applications, of course, but we're talking about a specific set of activities with people in specific roles assigned to being able to divide up the entire application landscape. It's vast, it's big. This is just why you need to manage it, because it's left by itself, it gets fairly chaotic, and you don't know where your resources are going. And it's very difficult to be able to take on application portfolio management and yet provide some near-term results instead of saying, yeah, we'll do this and come back to us 2 years from now. We'll have some interesting information for you. In most environments, that's not acceptable, so you have to be able to prioritize, kind of divide and conquer the landscape in a way that is pragmatic as possible. As I said, it requires someone with clear responsibilities to do this. This is a lot of work and fairly specialized labor and analysis. And it can't be just left to be done in general by people running applications. It has to be assigned to someone. We'll talk a bit about where this typically lands in organizations. And what you do is provide neutral assessments of the applications in your portfolio so that you can compare them on a variety of levels with a variety of metrics around contribution to revenue, importance in however way you want to measure that, complexity, funds allocated for maintenance and enhancement. When you do application portfolio management, you can take a step back and see where are your resources going? Are they aligned with priorities? Are the most critical applications actually getting the most funds, or are the ones that are absorbing most of your funds the things that are actually lower priority in the organization? Most people doing application portfolio management analysis take a look at the results of analysis and say, wow, what's wrong with this picture? We had no idea what our priorities were so misaligned with what we really needed to do. There's a lot around looking at costs, looking at agility in terms of the complexity of the application, looking at the risks involved with brittle applications and availability, statistics, and those sorts of stuff. But I'd say the real value we'll get to at the end of my portion of this presentation is really talking about alignment and planning and improvement. It's really about, there's a lot of information that will drive a lot of cost savings in your environment, but I think where you'll really get other folks' interest, particularly on the business side, is around being able to align the portfolio and activities around applications development relating to where the business wants to be next year and the year after that. Application portfolio management is basically just critical for developing your midterm IT strategies. And there's no getting around the fact that everything's not a green field. You don't get to just talk about what new things you want to do for the business tomorrow. You've got a legacy of applications. Even if those applications were just written last year, they immediately become something that is added to the pile of things you have to manage. You have to understand the relative priorities and the relative mapping of those to functional areas within your organization. Now, where are we with application portfolio management? You won't find anybody who will say it's not important. Yet, if you look at maturity numbers, which I have in the next slide, it actually lags behind other IT disciplines. And if, in your opinion, matches mine, which is that it belongs actually firmly in the enterprise architecture practice, it's also behind other enterprise architecture domains as well, as we'll see in a minute. There are a lot of reasons for this. A, it's a lot of work. One of the things, anything that takes a long, dedicated amount of resources for can easily find itself being, falling by the wayside. It's a strategic activity, and as you all know, operational and tactical things tend to shove strategic activity aside in favor of kind of putting fires out today. So it's easy to kind of lose focus and not pick it up again. But some of the other reasons are the fact that the responsibility for APM is often unclear or split across units, or there's just no clarity in the organization. Project portfolio management is not the same thing as application portfolio management. It's related. It's a form of portfolio management, but program office folks tend to do project portfolio management, and that's an important thing, but it's really different than assessing the application landscape. So if you ask who's doing application portfolio management in your organization and they point to the project office, program office, project management office, and what they're doing is PPM, then you're really not doing APM. As I said, my prejudice is obvious. I prefer it belonging to the EA group, and EA groups are increasingly picking up on this as a topic, as we'll see in another data slide. Often it falls to application development, though, and particularly in smaller to medium shops where there may not be enough resources to carve out all these various IT activities into neat little boxes and assign them to a place on the org chart. This can fall anywhere. When it falls into application development, you often run into this last bullet where the good management of individual applications is blurred with the notion of application portfolio management as a separate discipline, which will be, there's obvious why there's overlap there and why that might happen, but the fact is it's completely different. And if you talk to folks in your organization who think they're doing application management, and what they're really doing is managing applications in terms of uptime and enhancements and fixes, that's fine, but it's not for application portfolio management, which is a totally separate activity. So as I said, we'll get by my just opinion and talk about some data in terms of the current state of things. We actually have a survey up right now that we do every year on the state of enterprise architecture. Last year we got about 400 responses. Last week when I took a snapshot of where we are, we had 300 responses. As I said, it's still up. The numbers could change a little, but I'm not expecting any major change. Actually, if you're interested in the final numbers, my contact information is on the last slide. Feel free to contact me, and I'll get you the final numbers. But this is the first year that I put in a question around application portfolio management specifically. We've always asked about various standard domains of infrastructure architecture and application architecture and information and business architecture, and then whatever of the kind of adjunct domains are hot. Back at the turn of the century, in 2000, 2001, we used to include Internet architecture because that was kind of a new beast for a lot of organizations. Now that it's run-of-the-mill, we don't watch that separately. But security architecture, integration architecture are still fairly hot areas. The fact is, application portfolio management fell behind everything except information architecture and business architecture. Business architecture is fairly new. It's relatively nascent, moving up fast, but still early stages for that. So not surprising that maturity of that is at the bottom. And these are ranked in terms of their what is the current state of these parts of the EA program. These are sorted in descending order by folks who have implemented all or nearly all of what they really need. So this is really in order of who has advanced implementation of these. No wonder business architecture falls to the bottom. I'm not surprised information architecture is second to the bottom. That's always there because it's very difficult, a whole other topic of discussion. But the interesting note for today is that application portfolio management was third from the bottom compared to those. Things like application architecture, integration architecture, infrastructure architecture, well in advance of those maturity-wise. You'll see that, however, it's not that nobody's doing application portfolio management. 9% said they weren't doing it. For anybody who doesn't have the slides in front of them, I'll just read off some of these numbers. 29% said that we have implemented only a small part of what we really need. The biggest bubble here is at we have implemented a moderate amount compared to what we really need. That's 41%. That's kind of the closest we get to a majority here. Then we had about 21% saying they have fairly advanced implementation, 16% saying they have implemented a very large percentage of what they need, and 5% saying they've implemented nearly all of what we need. So we see that 20-ish% are pretty well along, probably getting really good value. The bulk are in this small to medium amount where I suspect, despite a lot of work, people aren't getting that much value out of it. Now, this data does not show that necessarily. They're just saying they have a moderate amount compared to what they really need. But people tend to bog down in this, and this really fits neatly into the anecdotal evidence that I had that made me want to put this question explicitly on the survey in the first place. I felt people had been doing this for a while, but were kind of running into a wall in terms of finding out what the value is out of this practice. And one of the biggest questions I get on this area is how do we tell people what value we get out of this whole activity? But I think this scenario is changing. I think this notion of getting bogged down in APM, not really getting value out of it, is about to turn around. As Willie said at the beginning, it's a ripe time for this, not just because people are doing planning for 2011, but because people are trying to get more strategic across the board. Over the last decade, organizations have gotten better at looking across the enterprise rather than into business functional silos. And there's been a concern with, operational things and lowering costs with the various recessions we've had this decade, but also at the same time not ignoring the strategic. And people are trying to get more proactive about strategic planning, but in a very pragmatic way. They want to do planning in a way that has an impact on their business capabilities next year and the year after that with distinct goals and distinct strategy. And when they do that, that's part of why business architecture is on the rise. People are looking at formal approaches to doing that. But when they say, okay, what do we do about implementing these strategies? Well, of course, they have to turn to applications to implement business capabilities and business processes and update their capabilities and advance what they can do with the technology to make all these things happen. And as I said, it's not a green field. They probably have applications doing something like this, and it's a matter of enhancing. And to do that, then you get into how easy is it to modify these applications. So when I looked at what people are doing next year, I know that enterprise architects always have a lot more on their plate that they want to get to that they don't. So when I asked the question about considering the structure and content of your EA program, please rank the following themes in terms of a priority for your architecture program for the next year, I just looked at the top three answers. And if they said it was priority 1, 2, or 3, I added up those responses and charted the results here. The ones that float to the top are some real obvious ones. However, what's interesting is that increasing EA involvement with APM processes came in second. Increasing EA involvement with projects came in first at 47%. And that's organizations. It sounds very tactical, but it's where EA programs get pragmatic governance. They look at projects and make sure they're kind of on track. So governance is important to EA, and it's like the implementation end of planning, so that's important. But what's really interesting is the highest strategic level priority here was increasing EA involvement with APM processes, which is 43%, just ahead of improving the communication of EA value, which is actually a perennial front runner for EA projects. If you start to look at why people are turning to APM, and you want to get beyond just my opinion, I think this question on the importance of IT drivers to the organization over the next year, it provides a good key. The question here was that on a scale of 1 to 5, what is the importance of the following IT drivers over the next year? And interesting, you have your perennial front runners in this. We always ask this kind of question, and you always get business IT alignment always floats to the top. For years, that's been the front runner about what's the key IT thing for next year. And then, of course, the next thing you get are a few things that you can't do without. Reduce the cost within the IT organization. Cost is always way up there. Get application projects done on time and on budget. You can't do away with that. Support regulatory requirements. Well, you can't not do that either. Interestingly enough, the very first kind of discretionary item beyond the things that are perennially there at the top of the list is to improve transparency to the business of IT costs, business demand, and capacity. And this increasing transparency has been a key theme in the last year or so. About a year ago, I did a webinar and it contributed to a document on next generation EA practices, and it was all about improving transparency, both into demand by getting involved in business architecture, but also in terms of execution and projects and applications as well. So there's a lot of attention to that. And I want to kind of digress a bit about what transparency means here. When you ask business folks about IT, what you usually hear is that IT is very, very expensive. A lot of money is sunk into IT. The fact is, and you don't get as much out of it, of course, as you think you would. And the IT folks are often confused by this, and they understand all the work that goes on to keep the shop afloat, both in terms of keeping the infrastructure up to date and cost-effective, and improving and maintaining and improving all those applications. The thing is, what the business only sees is the top third of spending, right? And typically, organizations range from about 60% of their IT budget goes to maintenance versus to 70%. That's the range. That leaves a third, about 40 to 30% of organizations' IT budget going to new applications. What the business sees is that one third. They see that third of everything they funnel into IT turns into projects that deliver them capabilities. And as we all know, projects quickly become applications that go from being new to just being things that we have to support. And more applications means next year we'll have more things to support on the same or decreasing IT budget. And so IT is often, the business is often frustrated that a small portion of the budget goes to new capabilities, and they don't really see what's going on behind the line, below the line, and behind the scenes. Application portfolio management provides that transparency. It provides the kind of analysis that shows you relative to one another in the portfolio, which are the applications that are most business critical, which contribute the most to revenue, which are important in any way you want to slice that up. What are the costs to enhance these things? Where's our money going? As I said earlier, you get a lot of aha moments when you find a lot of money being funneled into applications that did not go very high in the priority list in terms of business criticality or contribution to revenue, and that's often something that requires immediate action. You can look at functional completeness of applications, the ability to enhance this relative stability, change frequency. This is just obviously a small short list of the things you would do to do application portfolio analysis. But when all the work that's done to consume resources, people and resource funding, skills, and time, you can kind of find out what's going on when you do application portfolio management and see if your resources are really aligned in the right places. And, there's a lot about cost here. People go into application portfolio management, particularly architects, thinking that they're going to reveal the redundancy and the complexity and help the organization simplify their environment. And they kind of lean heavily on the idea that they can significantly reduce cost. But and there's a significant amount of cost that can be reduced, not only in terms of licenses for software you may have acquired or rented, but also in terms of the support for applications. However, the business is never really turned on by cost control. Yes, in times of belt tightening, you're dying for ways to tighten the belt, and so application portfolio analysis techniques come to the fore in order to find those spots, the low-hanging fruit. But really, when funds start freeing up, like is happening now as organizations come out of recession and actually start having a budget to spend, they really care about new capabilities. And this, I'm not going to read this slide out in any detail, but it shows kind of a simplification of a CMM scale of maturity. It kind of skips the initial stage and maps only to 4 stages, with stage 1 being really stage 2 of the CMMI scale, where you're actually starting to do anything. And, in early stages, you're acquiring knowledge, you're doing an inventory, you're collecting data, you're doing the analysis to make sense of the environment, to find out all the bits of data. Finally, you get to stage 3 and stage 4. Stage 3, you're actually doing something about the analysis you found in the previous stage, and, of course, the rinse and repeat aspects of the last stage, CMI stage 5, or what's stage 4 on this chart. This graphic I borrowed from another analyst kind of shows where it's continual improvement. The key thing is that once you've collected information and gone from those initial stages to managing and optimizing the environment, it's really at that middle point that strategy kicks in. You start using the information from application portfolio and management to change the future and to guide your activities towards building in the business capabilities you want once you've analyzed that portfolio. And that's what's really lights a fire under people. This is where you will get business people excited about application portfolio management. You might not talk to them in terms of, hey, let's talk application portfolio management, but you might say, let's talk about those business capabilities that you care about, and I'll tell you what we need to do to get there by 2011, 2012. Now you've got their attention. But you can't have that conversation until you figure out what you need to do to enable those business capabilities, and that means analyzing your portfolio and marrying that analysis to what you're finding out in your business architecture activities or whatever you're doing to get a hold of the details around where the business wants to go, what capabilities they want to have. The business really just cares about new capabilities. You can't make applications. It's not an IT-only thing. However, you can take the input you get from business folks in whatever form you can get it, architects, business architects, relationship managers, direct discussions with the business folks themselves, and basically bake that into your planning in order to kind of make this all happen. It's a relatively busy slide. I'm not going to read the words, but the bottom line is when you're looking at your application portfolio, you really need to you have to do a lot of work to kind of collect information and analyze it, but really strategic planning feeds your rationalization of the portfolio to say, okay, what do we do about these numbers? How do we prioritize it? How do we look at what we care about? And that goes into some applications you might have to modernize, other things you might be replace, and basically bring the organization forward. But it's all about new capabilities. They're going to summarize to get the most impact from application portfolio management. Really, it behooves you to focus on the strategic benefits, and it's marrying the application portfolio to new business capabilities, which you can't do unless you know what you have. This is a classic enterprise architecture activity, which is that you have to assess the current state to understand how to get to the future state. The cost aspect is really, really important, and there's an awful lot of money to be saved in identifying redundancy and reducing complexity. Just be careful about how you communicate this. If you focus up on freeing up that budget for new projects and communicate things in that way, you'll get a lot more mileage than just saying we're going to save money in a time period where people are sick of belt-tightening arguments and they just want to move ahead. Instead of saying we want to do application portfolio management to save more money, say this: hey, we're spending 67% of our budget on maintenance and keeping the shop afloat. What if I told you that after taking action on an analysis of our application portfolio, I can move that line so that 60% of our IT budget is spent on maintenance and keeping the shop afloat? That means I just freed up 7% of the IT budget without increasing the IT budget. And, I don't know where you are, but that 7% of an IT budget would be a kind of nice increase in your budget dedicated to new capabilities. And depending on where you are, that could be 5%, 10%, or more or less, depending on what you can do. But being able to express it in terms of freeing up existing funds and moving it from below-the-line activities to above-the-line new business capabilities, now you're going to get people's attention. And this is a key aspect of application portfolio management. Now, to do it right, you have to make sure somebody owns it as an ongoing process. Yes, there's a lot of upfront activity. It's a one-time thing if you haven't done it before to collect current state information. But really, it's one of these things that has to be an ongoing process, and someone has to own it. Again, I advocate that it's an enterprise architecture activity, but it's not. As long as somebody's doing it and dedicated to it and doing it right, it's really important for your organization. And it's important at this point to integrate with architecture planning activity, because it's all that planning about the business and about the technology plans for the infrastructure all have to come together in terms of how the business capabilities are being instantiated in the application portfolio. So the information is interesting in isolation. It's much more valuable to the organization when you integrate with all the other architecture planning activity going on. So there's my contact information. I won't keep that up there very long. Feel free to get in touch. We'll put this up again at the end. If you want to get in touch with me for the final version of some of this survey data, it'll probably be available in a few weeks. Thank you. And at this point, I'd like to turn this over to Dr. Kalex to talk about the Alphabet point of view.
Thanks, Gene. Very interesting aspects that you presented on, and I think there's 4 topics that I'd really like to carry over to the next portion of our discussion here today, and I just want to call them out for everyone to keep remembering and keep an eye on: value, maturity, roles, and responsibilities, and process. And I will be coming back to these as we go through the next set of slides, and will remind you about the importance and basically link back to the conversation that Jean has just shared with us. So with this, let me forward to the first slide, which actually talks about the capability maturity model. And we believe that the CMMI model is the right approach to be adopted here. Many organizations have already adopted CMMI for their internal processes. It's something that is very well established, and it also helps you understand what the potential is that you can open up for the organization in moving the ladder up from one stage to the next. As Jean has pointed out, many of today's corporations are actually at low maturity levels, while best in class, and that's probably the 20% that the numbers from Forrester would show, use application portfolio management to actually tighten the bonds between business and IT, and improve operational performance of IT. So if we were to look into what are some of the characteristics of the maturity extremes between initial and optimized, we see that at an initial stage there's typically no consistency in the way everybody looks at the portfolios. Oftentimes application lists are about the only thing that exists, and unfortunately it's not one list. It is typically dozens, if not even hundreds of lists. It's the John list and the Joe list and the Rick list, and if you put them next to one another, you will understand that they are contradicting one another, they are incomplete, they are inconsistent, and generally speaking, the information is not up to date. There's no notion of roles and process in that entire approach. If you, on the other hand, look into the optimized situation, you will find that portfolios are transparent, and I'm using portfolios in plural because you don't typically talk about one homogeneous portfolio across the entire enterprise. At least for larger organizations, that would not be adequate. It is understood, quantified, roles and processes are clear. There's a collaborative management to raise the bar for portfolio performance, and there's proactive approach to analyzing application portfolio processes and improving these application portfolio processes, much like most of the business processes that the organizations care about, are visiting performance of such processes and looking for ways of improvement. So in that sense, at an optimized state, application portfolio management becomes one of the core business processes the organization, the enterprise as such, is embracing. The consequences of this quantum leap from initial to optimized are a lot of potential value that can be gained. The transparency across the portfolios obviously provides much better insight into IT operations and ways of improving IT operations aligned with business priorities. It helps aligning business and IT. It provides for improved agility. It provides for a much better understanding of the risks that are entailed in IT supporting business, and so on and so forth. Now, from a perspective of how to approach this, obviously this isn't something that you want to engage with a big bang in mind. It is something that needs to grow steadily and in a stepwise approach, and small steps, specifically when starting from a low maturity level, still can yield and will yield significant benefits and returns to the organization. The approach will have to factor in differences in maturity that you may have within your own organization, because many of the larger enterprises are actually breaking out into relatively independent and autonomous units, business units, and associated IT units. That may result in different needs for data coverage and the governance approach. And you will have to start that journey with a clear understanding that this is going to result in a change in mentality and in a change of day-to-day activity, process, and operations. Because as Gene had pointed out, you will ultimately be embedding the application portfolio management process in your architecture planning process. So if we are aiming at moving from an initial to a repeatable state, that can be represented by that little egg that you see here on the leaf. So you're really starting with a very inconsistent view of your portfolios. You may have some spreadsheets and databases. There's no standard understanding of what data is actually relevant, and it is there's no common understanding of what the quality of that data would be. So what you will have to really look for is first implementing an inventory for applications. And now, having said this, you don't need to go on full breadth with this into the organization. It would certainly make sense to focus on specific areas. And as you're focusing on specific areas, you will probably look for areas that have large visibility in the organization. And if this is visibility in the business side of the house, all the better. So if you can take a portfolio that is associated with critical business capabilities, with critical business processes, you will certainly get more attention from the peers on the business side. In doing so, you can leverage things like wizards to drive consistency, to drive completeness and integrity of information. You will be able to use this to provide reporting capabilities, to provide this comparability that Gene had been mentioning across the different elements in the portfolio, to understand from a risk perspective, from a cost perspective, from a technology state-of-the-art perspective, from a quality of business support perspective, from a life cycle perspective, and many more of these. You will be able to interrelate the performance characteristics across the portfolio and understand where mainstream performance in that portfolio is and where the outliers are and which decisions you want to take to improve situation for the ones that are lagging behind the pack. You will be able, as I said, to associate this with pain areas, and pain areas may be related to the way IT is supporting the business, the way this specific portfolio is supporting and enabling the business, as represented by one of these screenshots down here. You would also be able to relate it to the information exchange aspect, and that may be a critical pain area for you. For instance, if you have an information security type of problem that needs immediate addressing. Or you may also be able to look into technology aspects and proliferation of technology, where you want to be able to get a better handle on which technologies are used across the enterprise and where it makes sense or doesn't make sense to deviate from the standards that you would like to put forward across the organization. Now, Moving on to the next step, here represented by the caterpillar stage, is really from repeatable to defined. And I often refer to the repeatable as the hero state, where you have very few individuals across the organizations are taking on all the responsibility and all the workload. This is clearly characterized by non-consistency. There's no proactive management associated with it. It's basically the few heroes are doing as much as they can to keep the car moving, if you want. In moving to a defined state, you will have to introduce more formal roles. You will have to introduce process, and that process specifically need to focus on assessing the application portfolios. So what that means is that you need to introduce responsibilities, accountabilities, the RASI model, basically. You need to look into defining sign-off processes so that you can combine accountability with record of action. You need to introduce the definition of roles, and you need to represent that definition of roles in access of data, in the way of navigating through the portfolios, as well as in the way information is provided to the community members in the specific set of roles. And again, there's a screenshot here that just exemplifies this for one case where a manager may not be interested in all the gory detail, but really would like to see the key characteristics, the performance indicators being rolled up to the top of the portfolio, be this cost information, be this risk and quality or agility information, be this something like what you can see here, aging information, which obviously is an important topic in many organizations that are facing obsolescence of technology. Finding the right way of visualizing the information obviously is a key challenge in that context, and depending on the role that the person, the stakeholder participating in the application portfolio management process has, one visualization may work or may not work. In the case that is presented here on the slide, you can see how criticality of business process is being matched against stability of supporting applications. And I can, with this type of visualization, fairly quickly identify where areas of concern or need for action lie in the portfolio here. If we are moving on to the next state, so from a defined to a managed situation, we can compare this to the chrysalis phase of the life of that butterfly that we are following here. And we do have collaboration already, so we are no longer in that all some do all. We no longer have that hero-centric approach. We have reached out to the organization, and we have managed that a large set of contributors is providing small amounts of contributions to the overall process. And we often refer to this as the all-do-some phase. The process still is fairly informal and likely non-consistent, and it is fairly disconnected from other IT management processes, most importantly, the architecture planning process. So we'll have to look into automating process. We'll have to look into measuring performance for the process and understanding trends of portfolios. To do this, we at Alphabet are positioning strong workflow foundation for these processes because it ensures that the processes are adhered to. I have means of automated escalation. I have the ability to improve speed and reliability of process execution, to do debottlenecking of process execution, to identify where the process need to be tuned with the organizational model, and overall expose the weaknesses that still exist in that process. So the result of this is obviously that application portfolio management is embedded in day-to-day IT management tasks. There's, for instance, sign-off in compliance assessment based on application portfolio data. There is lifecycle change information being fed into the planning process. There are architectural approval aspects and elements in the project approval process. And the portfolio assessment is linked to the strategy process that is being carried out between business and IT side of the house. The general rule here is that the more you are able to embed your APM process into the general IT management, the better the quality of the application portfolio management capability in your organization. So thinking about risk-related processes, thinking about IT finance and controlling processes, thinking about the strategy processes, thinking about the regulatory compliance processes, and so on and so forth. All these are processes that organizations need to carry out for the most part, and even if they don't need to, they are used to carrying them out, and they all should be linked to the application portfolio management. And that obviously is going to result in APM becoming a part of the genetics of the organization, and APM being integrated to the business strategy. So what we get to is obviously then the last step to take, which is moving from managed to optimized. So if we just recap what we have accomplished thus far, we have been able to get under control the data side of application portfolio management. We have managed to take on the responsibility and accountability aspect. We have managed to get the process in place, and we have turned into a proactive management. So what is really missing here is that self-perspective, that introspection of the APM process itself, and with the aim at seeking improvement opportunities. So what we will have to introduce is a regular review and assessment process for APM itself. So how can that look like? We should be looking into implementing boards that carry responsibility to report and review, for instance, APM data quality, which actually leads to an important observation. Because the data aspect may be mind-boggling to begin with, you need to set clear data quality, data completeness, and data integrity goals for yourself. And circling back to my earlier remark on the use of wizard or data capture type of processes, you need to bake these goals in terms of data quality, data completeness, and data accuracy into the definition of these wizard processes, so that you set attainable goals for yourself and for the entire organization. And part of that APM process review need to be, okay, when are we ready to move up one notch in our aspirations with regard to data completeness and data accuracy? You need to be able and need to build a culture of reporting and reviewing on the process quality and the process quantity. So how many times did we execute this process? And how many times of us executing this process have we actually been able to be successful? Have we been able to generate a benefit for the organization? So that means you need to be able to essentially do marketing about the things that you're doing, and you need to be able to do this with confidence. That means on evidence and data that you have collected over time. You need to understand the trends in your application portfolio, and trends are things like how are we able to manage lifecycle costs across our portfolio? How are we able, and if for instance you can foresee a significant increase in cost in forward periods for a portfolio, you would use this as a early warning signal to the portfolio owners to start looking into rationalization, means of rationalizing the portfolio that they are responsible for. Which is actually shown here in the second chart, where you can see plans and attainment of plans with regard to application rationalization, which is a typical pattern of decision-making and activity in application portfolios that have reduced in importance from the business capabilities and the business processes they are enabling and supporting. And CRM may or may not be an applicable situation in a specific enterprise situation. And showing plan and actual is actually also highlighting the importance to be able to track plan fulfillment. So it is not just for you to set ambitious goals to the organization, but you need to be able to go back to the organization and report on plan fulfillment and be able to adjust your plan based on the intelligence that you have gathered with regard to your ability to actually meet the planning goals and targets. So at this stage, you are at optimized, and you can be proud of yourself, and you have really accomplished a big piece. And you have been able to constantly and consistently provide value to the business organization by aligning the portfolio with the priorities of the business, by providing agility to business where business seeks and needs agility, and providing standardization to areas of business where business doesn't see competitive differentiators to be apparent. Now, let's embed this into the grander picture here. And the APM discipline is one piece of business IT management. And much like you have to mature your APM capability, you will have to seek maturing other business IT management capabilities, such as your capability management, such as your business IT synchronization, such as your project and release design. The way we do this with our product planning IT is really by providing an integrated approach to this, centralizing the management, centralizing the data, imposing quality standards, and supporting a consistent set of processes, providing stakeholders with the views that they need for their day-to-day activity beyond and outside the business IT management set of capabilities. Defining and monitoring responsibilities, as well as obviously linking into other processes that exist and that cannot be done without integrating to other systems and solutions, such as operational IT management solutions, be it a CMDB, be it a change management solution, or be it a multi-project management solution, and providing the right analytics and visualizations. So this is to ensure that IT is turning business value, and this way justifying its existence and being. Now, in light of the planning for 2011, and again, that is circling back to the value argument that I was bringing up at the very beginning. In light of the planning for 2011, you will probably have a need to assess where are you currently with your process maturity. How can you map the priorities that exist in your enterprise? And these are business priorities, very clearly. How can you map those to actual initiatives? And how can you identify where currently there's no initiative in place already, so where you will actually have to fill a gap? Understand how your capabilities compare to your peers in the industry, or potentially even across the industry, because chances are there isn't too much of difference between a consumer goods manufacturing environment and a retail environment. You will have a need to provide to your leadership recommendations for realizing quick wins. In understanding the need for such assessment in the market, we at Alphabet are actually positioning a 2011 readiness assessment that we are discussing with a number of large organizations out there. And if you feel you could benefit from such an engagement, we are obviously open to any conversations and happy to talk to you about. With this, I'm done for my part, and I think we have a few questions that I'd like Sierra to share with us.
Thank you, Uli. Yeah, there seems to be a great interest in this topic, and we've had lots of questions come in. The first question is directed to Jean. Jean, what metrics might you suggest for evaluating the progress and improving the maturity of the APM process?
Yeah, good question. No short answer, because I think there are a lot of metrics that would be valuable. I think the key thing is to gear the metrics to where your current state is and the progress you're trying to make. So, for example, if you're in the initial stage and you're just starting to collect data in about the process, your key metrics will be around what percentage of the portfolio you've actually collected information on. And you can make that relative to your priorities. You know, if you're looking at the entire portfolio, you can say, we have 35% of the application portfolio done, or data collected on a beginning analysis. If you're thinking that, there's one particular business unit that you get a known issue on, and you want to focus on there, you say, well, of the 7 business units, we're concentrating on one, and we're 75% there. And as you proceed, you can say, well, we've got 3 of the 7 business units done. So the metrics should relate to your relative activity, and in the early stage of that, it's around defining the organization. So a number of contacts or subject matter experts identified to get information about applications, or metrics around process implementation, organizational structures and process, and that sort of thing. As you move forward, it'll be around data collection and data analysis. As you get to eventually you get to the really critical stuff about opportunities identified, right? And they get into some cost issues and savings issues and redundancy. And if you're in a fortunate state of having actually being in several states of maturity at the same time, which is actually the case for a lot of organizations, rather than thinking of one level of maturity, you have one unit that's a bit ahead and another unit that's really just starting out. Then you need to kind of basically gear the set of metrics that you collect to those business units, and so that you understand that if you're saying you're at maturity level 2, does that really mean that you're at 1 in a couple of business units and 3 in a couple other business units? So just make sure they're explained in a way that's immediately clear relative to your environment. So that's a simplistic answer and a little high level, but if we had more time, we can go into a bit more details about at the different stages, which are the different metrics that will be key. But think about the actual results of each stage that you're in, what you're trying to get at, and don't start trying to measure bottom line, return on investment value when you're first at the data collection stage, because you'll just get very low numbers and be very frustrating.
Okay, thank you, Jean. The next question is for Uli. Uli, what kinds of measures can be used to assess the quality of the application data?
Again, a pretty interesting question, and it is certainly again something that will have to be fine-tuned to the specific situation of your organization, because you will have different emphasis on what data is important to you depending on the pain point that you are addressing. What some of the more simple measures that many organizations are using are things like integrity of data, the completeness of information, for instance, also considered from the perspective of how many of my applications in that portfolio have certain attributes being provided. Increasingly, as you are introducing process, you will actually look at how has accuracy and completeness and integrity of information been updated and completeness being confirmed. So you will be introducing some sort of an auditing process where you do sample checks, and otherwise you rely on accountability and responsibility of the people that are in charge of providing that information.
Okay, thanks, Uli. The next question is targeted for Jean. Any ideas about how to accurately measure the return on investment and business value of application portfolio management in order to develop a business case for APM?
Well, sure. There's some low-hanging fruit, and there's probably the easiest thing you can do, the most straightforward thing you can do, is when you look at redundancy in your environment. This will take a bit of investigation to get to the numbers, but you can talk about, it's all about the transparency, right? So you can talk about identifying the resources and the cost of maintaining applications, and when you start looking, finding opportunities to eliminate redundancy, then eliminate complexity, you can relate this directly to support costs and license costs and something like that. So there'll be the most direct thing will be a return on investment that says, X% of the IT budget, IT maintenance budget can be returned to the coffers for improvement. And again, as I said earlier, if you express this in terms of increase in the budget for new projects, that's a much better way to express this. And as I said, if you will, from 67% to 60% of your IT budget going to maintenance, that's a 7% improvement. Well, no, it's not actually. That's a 21% improvement over the 33% you formerly had going to new projects, right? I mean, the 7% relative to that 33% that you were spending before is a much bigger number. So the low-hanging fruit's around the cost, and that's the best way to make an ROI argument when people are looking for hard dollars. For my money, the real value is being able to align the strategy, and it's a difficult thing to quantify when people are looking for return on investment. When people are looking for hard numbers, you're better off giving them hard numbers. If you've got the ear and to talk to someone, you can really talk about how you need to align the portfolio with business capabilities and draw a couple of direct lines between plans and the value to the business of realizing those plans, and how that you need to assess the portfolio to make that happen. But as I said, that doesn't translate very easily to a return on investment calculation. And people, when they ask for this, they're usually looking for dollars and cents. So you might as well stick to that because there's a lot of money in it, to tell you the truth.
Can I just, I'd like to put an additional perspective to this, Gene. I think from a dollar perspective, I would see three main categories. One is your ability to identify that you already have something that is meeting the need of something that's been asked for. So basically leveraging existence and fostering reuse, and that is, if you want, avoidance of investments. I think secondly, you are in a situation that you described where you are able to consolidate or to obsolete things that are no longer needed, that may have lessened in their importance to business over the years that they exist. And then thirdly, you will obviously be improving staff effectivity and efficiency, because much of the information that is being managed in application portfolio management has to be managed, has to be provided, has to be used one way or the other for many of the compliance, risk, governance type of activities that large enterprises are just accustomed to doing or being forced to doing by regulatory requirements. The other aspect, if you want, the more non-tangible aspect is also very interesting. And some of the measures that have turned out to be very useful are things like how quickly am I able to respond to a requirement, to a demand from business, and telling them whether this is something that we at all can do or would do, and under which circumstances would we be able to do this. Because you have a much better handle on what it is that you have and how what you have is supporting the business, your ability to respond to demands is much better. And secondly, you would also be measuring how you are able to turn around on a demand that both business and IT have agreed to go implement. How quickly are you able to deliver to this demand? And that obviously is related to the complexity in the portfolio that you own. And much of application portfolio management is geared to managing, controlling, and reducing complexity in the application portfolios.
Okay, thank you, Uli, and thank you, Jean, also for your contribution to that question. And unfortunately, we have many, many, many more questions, and our time has run out. So I'm going to pass this back to you, Uli.
Thanks, Sarah. I think we feel very, very strongly about application portfolio management, and we see, and I think Jean's data are supporting this empirical evidence very, very strongly. There is a need to become more serious about application portfolio management. We believe that the methodologies and the tools and the best practice processes are available these days, and we see there is we have the right tooling available to get serious and started in organizations on a broad front. We are looking forward to conversations around this topic, and obviously would be happy to engage in one-on-one conversations around it. So thanks, everyone, for joining us today. You all have a great day, and talk to you soon again. Goodbye. Thanks, Jean, again, for joining us here today.
My pleasure.
Thanks.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes today's webinar. You may disconnect your lines at this time, and thank you for your participation.